Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tnmcoaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected Podcast. We're so happy and grateful you're with us again today, and we're super grateful for our growing community of leaders, executives, HR professionals who listen to this podcast in an attempt to elevate their heart, elevate their mind and their soul to next level and beyond, and to offer cutting-edge breakthrough learning for people within the organizational development. And today we're going to be elevating our mind. We know about mindfulness. We talked about mindfulness for quite some time, and this is one of these topics that never goes obsolete. It's always important. It's always relevant. And I somehow believe that mindfulness, it's even more relevant today than it has ever been before. And in today's conversation with my guest, Reiner Kraft, we're going to discover why mindfulness is so important nowadays. How can we use mindfulness in our leadership work? How can we increase the quality of our life, quality of our business work, quality of our performance by practicing mindfulness in our everyday life, in our everyday work life as well? Reiner is a seasonal technology leader. He's also an engineer, which is also interesting. He's a scientist as well. He has technical background. He has moved after his technical career into training, executive leadership. He's also expert in human potential. He's coaching and teaching around the world, and he is practicing mindful management. He is sometimes also using biohacking and the latest science of epigenetics to really connect the mindfulness with the human biology and to deliver on mindfulness in a very beautiful and unique way. He is the founder of The Mindful Leader, and he has published 12 mindful leadership principles, along with the practical teachings that cultivate presence in leaders and get them to define their own unique leadership style and increase the leadership effectiveness. So, Reiner, welcome. I'm so grateful and happy to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, thanks, Zoran, for having me on the show today.
Wonderful. So, as I said, mindfulness, it's never obsolete. It's something that we always need to practice, that we always need to be present with. So, tell us a little bit more about your journey into mindfulness. I've asked you already on the IG Live, but I would love for people who did not listen to our IG Live to know a little bit more about you and how did you move from the technical career when you were engineer and scientist into teacher, coach, and somebody who's teaching mindfulness nowadays?
Yeah, it's a long story. I'll try to focus on the highlights here. I spent most of my career in technology. Lived in California, in the Bay Area, for 20 years. And 10 years ago, roughly, I moved to Berlin and still working in tech for larger companies. I was also CTO for a smaller fintech startup from Deutsche Bank. Mm-hmm. So typical technology leadership stuff, but for me, the mindfulness in those old days, I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea. I stumbled into it when I got more and more stressed. Back in these days, I would say maybe 15 years ago or so, there was a mindfulness-based stress reduction MBSR class that my previous employer, Yahoo, offered me there. And since I was so stressed, I was basically trying to do more and more, work harder, but you couldn't, at some point, you can't compensate anymore. And you're getting into this mental state of exhaustion, not necessarily immediately burnout. Burnout usually comes even later if you still ignore those signs. So, but anyhow, I had no clue about all that stuff. I just felt like really stressed. And when I started to delve into mindfulness with a few, it's an 8-week class, basically. Once a week, you meet with them, a small group, 8 people or so, do a little bit of meditation, breathing exercise, all that good stuff. For me, this was all, first-time experience, felt good. And that's how I got into it. So I knew there was something, but I had... as a scientist, there was this feeling around, well, does this really work? is it really helping? Am I improving here in terms of getting more in a calm state of mind? And so it was more about, how do I know this is all valid, right? That was what is the is there something that I can measure and say where things are if I'm improving? Because I felt there is this huge potential that I'm up here. And that when my journey really started, I got deeper and deeper into it. More and more, I applied that stuff at work as well. I was able to build really large organizations, like back in Berlin, for instance, while working at Zalando, I had close to 400 people working in my organizations. So I should have, at that point, had like peak stress levels, but I didn't, because my mind at that point, but also mind and body, were already in a very upgraded, working in a very upgraded manner. So, and that was the recipe when I felt if you put these things together, you measure things where you are, you measure mind KPIs, key performance indicators, you measure the body using biomarkers, you bring these things together, and the science of epigenetics at that point was really helping me to tie these things together, because if you on one side just work on mindfulness alone, it's not going to cut it. You also need to work on the mind itself, which I refer to the software of the mind operating system. But then there's the software of the body, and that is done using epigenetics. So epigenetics is something where you can think about a way to regulate, manipulate, or basically orchestrate your genes. And that is where epigenetics comes in as the software of the body. So software of the mind, software of the body, you bring this together, and it worked out very well. And since then, and this was probably 5-6 years ago, I got deeper and deeper into this. And then I figured, I've spent enough time in the tech world. It's time to do something new. And this is when I founded the Mindful Leader, to work with executives, work with leaders, but also nowadays with many founders, entrepreneurs, just people who want to get more performance out of themselves, right? They want to squeeze out an edge, competitive edge, but usually they also want to do it in a way that they can sustain these results at work, but also in their personal life. And that's a lot of fun. And of course, I'm still learning. There's always new stuff. Technology is still for me a key factor, because I apply technology for mindfulness. I apply it also for upgrading the body. There's this whole area which is called biohacking, right? At the end, it's a fancy word, but what it's saying, it's an agile approach where you can incrementally upgrade the body as well. And if you do that systematically with more awareness, upgraded mind, upgraded body, this is for me the secret sauce that really works well.
Wonderful. And this is what I love about your content, because you bring the science into it. I've been talking to a lot of mindfulness teachers, and, who are teaching people how to balance their mind, how to understand their mind, how to get into the present moment, how to apply the techniques of meditation and breath work to be able to presence even more, to create calm mind. But what I love about you is that you're linking this into the epigenetics, into the biohacking, into the science, for us to be able to sustain ourselves, which I think it's a very new, modern approach to the mindfulness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the key findings about 7-8 years ago. My body was at that point in a terrible shape. If you basically work in such a stressful environment, your neurotransmitters, they get depleted, right? Your minerals, everything on a macro level in terms of nutrients, resources is all depleted, right? And so all kind of symptoms usually creep up, which when you talk to regular doctor, they, let's say, high blood pressure, right, or insulin resistance, or whatever it is. So all that stuff creeps up. But usually doctors, medical doctors, they're not looking really at the causes. they basically just treat some of the symptoms. For me, I had no clue about all that stuff. And that's why I figured I need to go deep into neuroscience. I need to go deep into functional medicine to learn these missing pieces so that I can get to the root cause of everything. And that's when I figured out, it's possible to do that. You have to look at your genes. You have to see how your body works as a system. You have to support your genes, but usually the problem is many of us, we all have like thousands of different variations in these genes. They're called SNPs, SNPs. And these SNPs basically, although they're minuscule changes, but they make a change how our genes at the end of the day work. And if you think about the body of lots of complex systems interconnected, working together, it's so important that all of these systems at the end of the day work in harmony together, they collaborate, and sometimes you have to push a little bit. And here I found that using micronutrients in therapeutic dosages, putting these things together, you can support your genes. And then all of a sudden, the breakthrough then also was that I've seen on my meditation practice, you could see the upside there as well, right? All of a sudden, you could get in much deeper states of meditation. You could relax much easier. It's like this whole aspect of what I call mental agility or mental flexibility is something that you get as a freebie, so to speak, right? All of a sudden, cognitive abilities go up. So the brain as the hardware basically has everything it needs. It can run super fast with a lot of throughput, highly efficient, and it works very smooth. And that was the experience. And now I basically try to work with, I work with many people, and I have different programs that I build up for people in 3 to 4 months to go through this as a shortcut, right? For me, it took 10, 15 years, but the reality is if you know what you're doing, you don't need 10, 15 years. You can do that in a few months. But of course, in some cases, depending on where people are, it may still take longer. I think my recommendation, the sooner the better you get into this space and learn. But you have to learn. You have to build up your health competencies, your mind competencies, and awareness, as in mindfulness, is the underlying driver. It's the enabler for all that stuff. Right? That's why this is the foundation. Mindfulness is the foundation. Increasing awareness, that is the recipe that you need for being successful on upgrading the software of the mind, upgrading the software of the body. So you start always with awareness first. That is my learnings here. And then you figure out over time, iteratively, what works for you well, but you need to know how to measure things. So that's always important. You need to know what is a baseline, what kind of things you're doing. Doesn't really matter. There's always many different interventions, supplements, techniques, whatever. And then you need to measure again to see how it's changing. And if it works for you, you do more of it. If it doesn't work, you get rid of it, do something else, right?
So let's kind of go into the case here. I mean, because I know that people who are listening right now, especially leaders or small business owners, people who want a lot from life and they engage in the work life with passion and purpose and meaning. And then they come to this point when they feel that, as you felt at one point in your career, you are depleting yourself. You're doing a lot more and more and more and more. It's always more, for a lot of the people nowadays, because the technology is facilitating us to work across the time zones. We're always on, and it never stops. And somebody begins feeling that build up. So what will be the process that you will get people through, first of all, to get fully aware, to where they are right now, to become mindful? And then what will happen in the stages of, let's say, you guiding them or coaching them towards this peak performance through mindfulness?
Yeah, so that was exactly also the question many years ago, where I figured, what is a good process to help people go through this in an efficient, effective manner, right? And as I said before, awareness is the foundation. So I figured 4 months is probably, I went to 3 months at the beginnings, but nowadays I figured 4 months is a little bit more casual, more relaxed. So 4 months is still, it's a good pace. I say, okay, it's these 4 months. Let's go through a transformation. It's really a transformation process. How can you then, in the most effective way, do it? Well, we know from also my background in technology, an incremental, agile way is the way to go. So that means we're doing weekly sprints, basically. And that is a time frame, 4 months, weekly sprints that works very well. It's not too much time effort that goes in here. That's important because people I work with, time is always of essence. It's always tight. And so it has to be done in a feasible manner. And so then the underlying foundation as one thread of execution is measurable mindfulness, learning the methodology of measurable mindfulness, learning how to use technology to assist in that process. And usually I go with milestones month by month. And the key metric, as I talked about KPIs, is your level of present awareness, your LPA, and that LPA establishing a baseline initially. And LPA is, you can think about it, it's a percentage of your waking time that you're fully present and connected to the present moment, right? So when typical mindfulness teachers, they talk about becoming present, becoming connected to the present moment, that is, when you do that for 1 minute, that is called a mindful minute. Nowadays, there is technology, there's apps out there like Calm, Headspace, all those things where you can use for instance, to meditate or do breathing exercises, and they keep track of time. If you do that with your smartphone, right, so it keeps track of these mindful minutes, and let's say you obtained 20 mindful minutes per day. Usually people are awake for 16 hours, so roughly 1,000 minutes. So you can see this is about 2% LPA. It's not that much, right? 2%, but it at least is a start. And that's when usually I work with people, they baseline their level of present awareness, their LPA, usually 2%, 3%. This is the average what people start with. And you can think about it the rest of the day. So what do they do in this 97%?
What do they do in 97%?
That is really, they're living in an unconscious state of mind. They're fully trapped in their mind, in their thoughts. So there is a lot of thought activity. They identify with their thoughts. And they always think about the future. They rehash the past. They're not really there in the present moment. They're everywhere. They're pretty much in their mind, trapped in their mind. And so they're not experiencing also life as its fullest, right? And so you don't have to meditate all day to basically be in a present state. Like many people, for instance, they like to do sports, they like running, they like, for instance, more extreme sports like climbing, parachuting, whatever it is. But the reason they do that, I thought about that also for a long time, right? But these types of sports, usually they get you out of their head. They get you connected to the present moment. Because if you're rock climbing, right, there is not too much thinking going on. I mean, you're basically fully there in the present moment because you know if your next move is not that precise, you may end up dead, right? You fall down. And so that's why you're fully present. And that's why people enjoy that being present. But sometimes, so it's not necessarily meditating, but it's basically just finding ways to calm the mind, to silence the mind, right? And that's where your LPA is. And then if you add these things together, so apps are doing a little bit of it, but usually it's also people learn how to do it with manual tracking. So you do that tracking. And then let's say you are at maybe 3%. The goal is to get you monthly up, let's say at 6, 7%, 10%, eventually 15% or even more after those 4 months. And with an LPA, in my experience, of 10, 15%, that is significant. That is a big change compared to your maybe 1 or 2%, right? And that is the awareness I'm talking about. Getting consciousness, getting awareness up to more than 10% LPA per day. And that's when the magic happens, right? Because now you're so fully alert, fully aware, in the ramifications are really broad and deep. For instance, in the current job, whatever you're doing, this awareness helps you to have more clarity. You can make better decisions, but you also become aware of what's actually happening in your mind. And this is the start where you can, the second pillar, which is called mind management, it's also the second thread of execution that you're working on. Now you have awareness, you can look at the mind, the software, you can look at your thought activity, you can start now manipulating it as well, right? That's why I'm talking about upgrading the software of the mind, because a lot of this programming is just, it's buggy, it's not working, it's just a mess. It basically, when you grow up as a child, right, the mind think about as a neural network, right? I got also a long experience in machine learning, deep learning, AI, and all that stuff. That's what I was doing while working in tech. And so it's very similar. It's basically the mind is learning, and from all these past experiences, the programming may not be optimal. It may not serve you well. But first you have to become aware to even look at that programming so that you can realize, this is what I'm thinking. There are limiting thoughts, false beliefs, there's reactive patterns that get you in a defensive mode. They cause fear, they cause anxiety, they diminish your self-confidence, all that stuff. You don't need that as a leader or as an entrepreneur. You need to basically have a software that runs optimal, right? And so you need this awareness to look at it. Then you can go into debugging process. There's all kinds of methodologies out there. This is where neuroscience kicks in. And there's also technologies out there as well that support in this process. And then the third pillar, which is also in parallel, that is where you start supporting your body. This is where biohacking epigenetics kicks in. Again, you need awareness to become aware even how your body feels, right? Because people don't even, body awareness is like zero. Their body is aching like crazy. They don't even realize that it's aching. But once you become more aware, all of a sudden you can do something like in easy exercise. At the beginning, people learn how to do body scan as an example. And all of a sudden you feel, oh, my shoulder, there's something going on, right? Or there's this tension in my chest. They have ignored it all the time. All of a sudden they become aware, right? So you become aware of the body, and then usually figuring out at that point, what can you do in terms of nutrition, exercise, but also micronutrients, proteins, amino acids, all the good stuff to support the body, because the brain needs a lot of energy, right? To meditate well or to use these cognitive abilities, the brain uses about 20% of your energy every day, 24/7. And so that's why
A lot.
it's a lot, yeah. That's why you need to provide the right nutrients so that it can work. And then the problem is people think they live healthy, but they're not. There is also, I mean, this whole topic of nutrition is so complex. There's so many books out there, but there's also scientific evidence on certain things. But because we're all different, we have different genes. One diet that works for one person may not work for the other. So you have to, same thing here, you have to measure. You have to know if this is even working for you. And that's what makes it complex, unique. But in that process, you're learning these tools to figure out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And then when these three threads of execution come together, this is when the synergy is happening, right? And then, good stuff happens usually.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you mentioned nutrition, because I think that I'm very passionate about this myself, that, not everything works for everybody, and it's based on your genes. So you mentioned micronutrients a few times. What are the good micronutrients? Is that something that, we can take as a supplementation based on how we feel, or is it linked to the specific biology or genetics of our body?
Well, I mean, the topic itself, you can go really deep here. Myself, I give you an example. I have an optimized protocol of micronutrients and nutrition that I use every day, typically anywhere between 80 to 100 different capsules I swallow. Right? So that doesn't mean that everyone needs that, right? But it's based on measurement and based on what my body needs to optimally thrive. I give you an example. I mean, if you look at some of my older photos, like a year ago, I had completely gray hair, right?
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you. I was checking your Instagram and you look different. You look much younger. And I was like, how is this possible? Because, you know, the photos before you were more with the gray hair and now your hair, what happened?
Yeah, exactly. So this is when I started then working in this, figuring out what my body needs based on my genes and the science behind it, I was able to literally turn back the clock in terms of my biological age, which there are certain tests you can do that are out there that are relatively precise, like they give you usually plus minus 2% precision on your biological age. And so I was able to turn my biological age about 10 years younger than what I'm actually are. Right? So which is not bad. Of course, I'm always trying to get even better. It's doable, but as a result and side effects, right? And all of the sudden good stuff happens, like you feel it on the skin, you feel it on the energy levels. But for me also then the hair, right? That was a big deal because in my 30s roughly, this is when it started, still in California, my hair basically turned more and more gray. At some point, like when I was in my 40s, it was almost white, right? And then people said, oh yeah, that's when you have stress. And yeah, it is the case. Stress creates more oxidative stress. And oxidative stress in the body may yield to also grayish hair, right? And that also means it can be reversed if you know how to do it, right? And so for me, this was a motivation to see if this stuff works. Again, biomarkers, figuring out how do you measure that, right? So keep oxidative stress low, figure out what nutrition does also the hair need to generate this color, right? And so I got earlier this year, then last year actually, then the breakthroughs, and all of a sudden it gradually turned back to pretty much original color. Which is cool. It's of course not perfect. It's still work in progress. But nevertheless, if I look back on my photos I took when I was in my 20s, it's roughly that color. And it's a nice side effect because it tells you, look, this is real stuff. This is actually working, right?
Yeah.
And right. But yeah, I think the key thing here is supplementation, usually, because you can't get them from healthy nutrition alone. There is this myth that people saying, I eat well, I eat organic foods, vegetables, whatever it is, or meat, and then I'm fine. No, you're not, right? Because usually the body is such a bad state. You need therapeutic dosages from supplements, from minerals, from amino acids, nucleotides, all that good stuff. You need it in therapeutic dosages, which you won't get from regular diet. And that's the key thing. Then you have to figure out, once you start with supplements, you can easily make a lot of mistakes. Yeah, and people just throw in stuff and then think it works. There's a lot of also, you can do a lot of wrong with that as well. So you have to know what you're doing, and that requires a lot of learning, experimentation. Unfortunately, the people I work with usually don't have the time for that stuff. They
isn't it?
Exactly, right? And so you need a lot of time to learn this and figure out this. And so at the end of the day, you have to know what you're doing. And that's why it's important to work with functional medical practitioner, medical expert in that field. Not just one, usually a few more, because some people are more specialized, let's say, in detoxification. Another one is more specialized in, I don't know, cardiology, brain health, whatever. So usually you have few of these experts, but you are, over time, you have to learn some of these, I call them health competencies, so that you can drive the process and assume full ownership. So it's not that, let's say, the medical doctor is the owner, you are the owner, right? And you have to make the decisions about your health and biology, but also about your mind. And this is when, at the end of the day, it's learning, right? Learning by doing, you get better and better. And it takes some time, but usually when I get people through that process in 4 months, they have a pretty solid foundation. May not be perfect yet, but it evolves. And since I work now for a longer time with people for many years now, you can get quite, you can get quite advanced. And some people, they enjoy it so much, they make it this hobby even their profession at some point. But usually you don't have to, right? I think once you reach a certain level of present awareness, you reach a certain level of quality in your mind software, and you reach a certain health level that you can basically maximize also your contributions. And I think then you're in good shape.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And I love the physical aspect of it, because as you said, living in by example, or you being able to reverse your age, so to say, and practicing mindfulness and being aware of what you need. So what you said about this, you need to go to the functional medicine, just to wrap it up for the audience, and you will find the doctors who will be able to guide you through this process of micronutrients. Or is that something that you offer in your consultations as well?
No, that I offer all that stuff as well, because this is it's a really complex topic, and I learned it. I got deeper and deeper into it because of I figured if it's the missing piece, right? If on one side you can cultivate awareness through meditation, but sometimes the mind is not in a good shape. The body basically doesn't have sufficient level of neurotransmitters that you need to even meditate well, right? And so you have to figure out at the end of the day also, what do I need in terms of, or what does my body need to thrive, right? And so you learn all that stuff usually when I work with people in this program. It's called a high performance mind. High performance mind, that is my vision, when you bring mind, body awareness together. And you start very simple with a few supplements, some basics. But then as you move on, of course, you get better and better. There is no upper limit, right? People, or usually, measuring also biological age is something I recommend after doing that for 6 to 9 months, because then usually you can validate your progress. You see that in an ideal case, your biological age matches your chronological age. Usually, if I would do a test like this at the beginning, people would get demotivated because they may be 5 or 10 years older than their chronological age. But the reversal can be done also relatively quickly. So that's why I'm saying that after 6 to 9 months, measuring that, so I measure it once a year, that's sufficient. And that helps you to see whether you keep on track of things, right? And yeah, but as I said, it all starts with mindfulness as a driver, measurable mindfulness to also validate progress and see how you're meditating and how your brain is doing, and really cultivating this awareness level up to a certain level that this actually has improved, right? Because if you're not doing that, the danger is you meditate a little bit here and there. Theoretically, let's say you're on an awareness level LPA 3%, you do a little bit here and there, and then after 3 or 4 months, you may still be at 3%. You just don't know it, right? Because you didn't track it. That's why the tracking is so important. You have to actually show that you're getting your awareness level up to 10-15%. And that is usually an initial investment of effort that pays off, because once you're reaching that level, usually you won't fall back into the old state, because you become aware immediately when you fall back into old habits, and then you shift again, right? So that's why it's important, through tracking, through measurements, is awareness actually going up? Have you reached a certain state? And then all this other stuff, pretty much happens then as a byproduct, but you have an enabler through mindfulness.
Beautiful. So one challenging question I always ask, because I think that this is a good question to ask for participants to kind of evolve a little bit in this conversation. So when we talk about present awareness, what is that present awareness in your definition? Is it the soul? Is it the higher power? Is it your essence? What is that?
Yeah, that's, I mean, there's, of course, several ways you can describe it. Awareness or consciousness is, at the end of the day, the essence of who you really are, right? You can, of course, now go deeper into the spiritual realm as well, and there is a lot of explanation here. But to keep things simple, I would just say, awareness is basically becoming aware of your surroundings, also your inner world, your body, your mind, and so on. It is that it's not an object, but it is maybe it's a field. Sometimes I use the term field of awareness. It's something where those signals that are happening around you, right, they get through your brain, they get processed, but who becomes aware of it, right? It's and so, yeah, that's why I think this awareness is something, I mean, people debating whether this is an artifact of the brain, right? Is it at the end of the day simply the brain doing it? But then how can people become aware and are aware? Even, I mean, you read about a lot of these stories, for instance, and also scientists, right? When the brain is no longer working, they're still aware, right? How can that be, right? So there is a lot of also speculation around it, but from my point, it's a very simple concept and way that I'm saying, look, doesn't matter what it is at the end of the day. It is a field of awareness that lets you become aware of your body, your mind, and everything you experience in life. And you can sense it. You can sense awareness if you, for instance, do a little meditation, close your eyes, and just try to recognize, sense into your body, and you feel there is this energy field. It's vibrating, right? Mm-hmm. It's there. You can sense that, and people who got deeper and deeper into mindfulness, they know what I'm talking about. But that's why I would say awareness is this foundational element, but you don't have to. It's not any belief that is needed here to, is it like this or like this? It's not relevant to this discussion. It's just you experience life through awareness, and then it allows you to become aware of all those things in your body, in your mind, and that gives you the opportunity to improve it, to maximize some of these functions of the mind, of the body, and that just gives you a more pleasant life experience, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. You know, it's always good to ask questions like this. So as the leaders and executives are listening to us, so when they go to the program, they become more mindful. You know, I would love to wrap it up with you. What happens with leadership? What happens with mindful leaders? How are they running the businesses? What happens with the decision making? How they really get a relationship with their own unique leadership style? What is the outcome of somebody embarking into making a choice or decisions to become more aware, more mindful, more conscious and present? And what is the impact of leadership in organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's why people get motivated in the beginning is they're looking for more impact, right? So sometimes they're looking for more clarity or more calmness. They get, there's so many signals around and noise every day that gets you into stress mode. And if you're stressed, you can't make good quality decisions. So there's a lot of practical aspects, more energy, being more resilient, right? So more focus, more working more in a flow state. So there is all this good stuff basically happening, but you need, as a prerequisite, you need an increased level of present awareness. So a higher LPA, you need an upgraded mind and body to experience that. And so the results, what you're experiencing, they come in handy in your day-to-day work, but day-to-day life, obviously, as well. And then they impact the quality for instance, as a leader in the organization or running a startup or whatever it is. So the benefits are there. And of course, I mean, it's so straightforward. If you have more cognitive abilities running here, if you have higher emotional intelligence, I mean, read all these books, you know that this is the good stuff that make good leaders, right? But as long as you're caught in your, I call it the monkey mind, right? If awareness is low, you're caught in your monkey mind in basically completely reactive mode, and the body is like completely out of resources in a bad state. You may even be in a sick state, mentally exhausted state, whatever it is. I mean, it's so limiting in all those directions. And so at the end of the day, the motivation comes once you unlock these higher states of awareness, these higher states of functioning and well-being and mind and body. You don't want to go back, right? So once you reach these levels, and that's why a good thing, once you experience them, I wouldn't want to go back to 10, 15 years from now, right?
Of course.
You use them and you're grateful that you can use them and achieve them. And of course, I noticed there's always a little bit more you can get. There is no end to it. But at some point, it becomes a very pleasant state to be in, and you can just get stuff done faster, right? I mean, sometimes work in the old days, it would take me 2-3 hours. I get done in 20 minutes, right? It's just because everything runs faster, more clear, more effective. So benefits, I think there is no end to this.
There's no end. Yeah, exactly. You know, that's inspirational for people to hear, because sometimes we get trapped into our old ways of being. You know, the work is stressful, the demands are higher, and we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm so happy that we're now highlighting what is the light at the end of the tunnel when you choose. And I'm also using the word specifically, we need to choose this. This is something that is an offer all the time, but, you know, life moves on, life takes over, business takes over, and people usually justify it. I would love to, you know, go on a session with Reiner. I would love to learn about mindfulness. I would love to practice it, but I don't have time. So we have to choose to create the time, which is the absolute and total priority for all of us. Now, as you are on the cutting edge of all of this, how do you see this evolving into the future? Because right now we can see the emergence of AI, you know, the technology is rapidly expanding and accelerating in your domain, in your field of mindfulness, biohacking, body awareness, and technology. Do you have any glimpses into the future of what do you foreseeing can happen and where we can go, just from the top of your mind?
Yeah, I think we're still in the relative early stages here with a lot of the technology choices. AI is advancing fast. Generative AI models, deep learning software and everything gets better and better. And even in the health, I'm working as a scientific and technical advisor with a few startups in these spaces on leveraging AI for mind, body, but also in other realms. Search technology, information retrieval, whatever. So I think there's a lot of stuff, good stuff, hopefully as well, to come. And we're still in a relatively early phases. We're also in relatively early phases about learning how to really systematically upgrade mind and body from a scientific perspective. A lot of science is there for decades, but now turning this into practical knowledge and figuring out how this all works is in early phases, in here and there, right? There is not that many functional medicine doctors available if you look it up in your area, because it's just people getting into it and learning it, get better, right? And so if you can take advantage from these developments, and I think now is the time to do it.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for this insightful and amazing conversation so far. So what can we practice? Anything that you would love to invite our listeners to do as a result of being present with you and me in the last 40 minutes and listen to this fascinating topic? We can talk for days and days and days. I mean, I know this is something that you can dive deeper and deeper and deeper, and I'm sure we covered the basics for everybody to be enticed and inspired and elevated. So how would you like to leave the audience with? Anything that you would love them to practice, try out, read, research? What would be your final takeout?
Yeah, I would say start exploring about level of present awareness, how aware you really are, and become aware of these moments, these mindful minutes, these mindful moments every day. Start tracking them, right? Start counting them a little bit, right? If you use an app, some meditation app or some mindfulness app, whatever it is, see how many of them are really there. Take some time on this. And now you know that when you calculate this up, divided by 1,000, you get into percentage what your LPA is. And do this for a few weeks, becoming more present, and see, can you find more mindful moments every day to bump up this LPA? That would be a good starting point.
Wonderful. Reiner, thank you so much for your wisdom and your presence. Thank you so much for the energy that you're bringing in this conversation, and for the vast knowledge and resourcefulness. We're very happy that you're with us today. Thank you so much once again for joining us. And to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to Tnmcoaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected. We were going to reference all the resources after this podcast. Of course, you can follow Reiner, go to his website. There are all resources there for you. And we hope this will empower you to live even better life from here on. Thank you, Reiner, once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.